Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Valoria Armstrong. Valoria is the Chief Global Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Unum. Prior to Unum, Valoria worked her way through the ranks of American Water, leading Chattanooga's Tennessee American Water as president from 2015 to 2019, among other roles with the company. Valoria, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before we delve into your frustration as a Dallas Cowboys fan, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Well, it's a little bit of what I need after the Super Bowl and this football season. I'm actually drinking a medium brew this morning. It's a community brand, and I've been drinking it for a number of years now. It's pretty smooth, so I enjoy that. No sugar, just a little bit of hazelnut cream in it, and that gets me going for the day. Yes.
Well, as I tell people when they come on, I am a black decaffeinated drinker.
Okay.
I can't handle the caffeine anymore. I've gotten too old.
Well, I have caffeine and it gets me through the day. I just have one cup.
Just one cup?
Just the one cup, and I sip on it throughout the day. So I don't mind if it gets a little bit cold. It's still fine for me. It just gives me a little bit of that boost that I need. And I tell my team at work, if you see me go for a second cup of coffee at the second half of the day, then that means it's been a rough day, and maybe we should stay apart for a little bit.
There's something up. So they judge you based on your coffee intake throughout the day.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, I teased you a little bit about the Dallas Cowboys, and that's only because I've never been a Dallas Cowboys fan. Unfortunately, I'm a New York Jets fan, and that's even worse.
Oh, goodness. Well, you know, we say you either love us or you hate us.
Yep.
And I tell everybody I'm married into it. My husband is a Dallas Cowboys fanatic. And so there was no other way for me to go when I said I do. And I've been on that bandwagon ever since. Every season, it ends in heartbreak.
Yeah.
But, you know, we'll bounce back and get ready for the next season as if we're going to the Super Bowl.
That's what you got to do. That's a great attitude to have. Well, I really appreciate you coming in and talking to us. And I'm absolutely interested in your career arc and what you've done, because you grew up in a very small Georgia town, right? Swainsboro?
Yes. Swainsboro, Georgia. Very rural.
We're in a relation to Atlanta, southeast?
It's south of Atlanta, so it's as if you go through Macon, and you're traveling to Savannah. So if you're about halfway to Savannah, getting past Macon, then you're right there, dab in the middle of where Swainsboro is. It's about 10 minutes off the interstate, so when you think you've gotten there, you still got another 10 minutes to go. And it's a small town, very rural. We had just a couple of traffic lights through town. When the Walmart was built there, we felt like we were on the map, and that was the hangout spot for us. Whenever I was in high school, we'd go to our football games, and then after the football games, the place to go would be the Walmart parking lot.
Watch everyone come through.
Exactly. And then the McDonald's across the street.
Yeah, so it's small town America.
Yes.
So growing up, did you think to yourself, I really want to get into HR and diversity, equity, and inclusion? Did you see your career going where it was? What did you want to do when you grew up?
No, I didn't see that at all. I wanted to be an attorney. I wanted to be a lawyer.
Trial lawyer?
It was, I actually wanted to be more of a defense attorney that would just go in for trials. And it was one of those things, I didn't have anybody in my family that would be considered kind of white collar. All of my family, blue collar workers. But I would see attorneys on television, and I would say to myself, I can see myself doing that. I would love to get into just debates and arguments with friends and my siblings, and it was all about me making the case for whatever it was that we were debating about. But I love the ability for attorneys, especially on the defense side, to be able to go in and make the case for their clients and to be able to see the outcome of that. So that's what I thought about early on that I wanted to do.
Yeah, you wanted to defend someone who needed defending. So through high school, I would imagine you've got that in your mind. Kind of what changed you? I know you mentioned you went to a joint high school college program your junior year.
I did. So when I was a junior and when I was a senior in high school, we had an opportunity to do joint enrollment is what it was called. And you could go take college courses. And it was at East Georgia State College that I was able to go to. And I started to take some accounting classes. And I found out that I already loved, had a love for numbers, but really never knew like what the opportunity could be with that. And when I took my first accounting class, and I said, "Oh my goodness, this is for me." I love just all aspects of.
Really?
I know. It sounds so interesting.
I mean, because
right?
I'm sitting here, I remember taking my first accounting class, going, "Oh my God, I got to drop this class."
I loved it. I loved the kind of going in and doing the balance and balancing checks and balances and debits and credits and all of that. So I thought, I definitely would love to be an accountant.
Yeah.
And so that's the path that I pursued whenever I went to college at Georgia Southern University. And so my plan was get through college and I'm going to be an accountant somewhere, work in a bank or be an accountant, a CPA in a firm.
And we'll get to your later part of your career, but I'm sure that prepared you really well for some of the responsibilities you picked up later in your career.
It did. And it still does. It still does. Because I think about even in HR, the role that I'm in, if you grow up in that from a career standpoint, you don't get that exposure to P&Ls and being able to actually run a business part of the area. So for me, I have kind of a natural gravitation towards data and numbers and being able to connect the dots. And it helps, especially in the HR space.
I would imagine it does, because my interaction with HR was a lot of people who were in HR from day one, and having that perspective of the total business and how the business works and the importance of the accounting aspect and everything else had to be just a great advantage.
I think it has been over the years. And I know we'll talk about this in a little bit, but especially when I moved into my role for president of Tennessee American Water, which was a position that you had complete accountability for your P&L and the bottom line and being able to ensure that you made your budgets on a quarterly basis. And so it was an easier transition for me. I didn't feel like it took a lot for me to kind of understand, well, what does it mean to have a capital plan and these capital dollars over here? But then you've got your operating budget, which is completely different.
Yeah. So you go to Georgia Southern, you get your accounting degree. First job, you work for a dentist?
Well, I actually worked for a dentist when I was in high school. That was my first job in high school. I was 15 years old, and I grew up in a single parent home. My parents divorced whenever I was around 9 years old. And so my mom, she raised us. It was 4 of us. And my dad also had another son. So I actually have 3 brothers and 1 sister. So altogether it's 5 of us. And so when I was in high school at 15, I was like, I need a job.
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to make some money.
Have your own money?
Yes. And then just kind of thinking through the things that we needed in the household and being able to help out there. So the place that we would frequent the most would be the dentist office. And so when I went into the dentist office one day, his name was Dr. Lewis. I said, "Dr. Lewis, I'm looking for a job. Can I get a job?" And he said, "Well, you're 15. I can't give you one now, but when you turn 16."
Yeah.
And so as soon as I turned 16, I was up there at the office and I asked if I could apply for a job, and he actually hired me. So I worked at the front desk, making appointments for customers or clients and checking them in. I did a lot of filing.
So in addition to the contribution you're making to the family and your own money, what did having that job at such a young age, what did that teach you? What do you take with it today?
It taught me a lot about just dedication, accountability, and commitment, being able to get to work on time. But I tell you, I was so excited just to have a job and to have money, to be able to help out wherever I could. I actually enjoyed it. I loved everybody that I worked with. And I've been working ever since. So 16 and many jobs since then, but even all the way through high school and college. I've always had that dedication to work. And I think that has in some respect, come back, and it's paid its dividends for me, as I've had other opportunities in my career. What
was the most unusual part-time job you had working through high school and college? Was there anything that stood out and you said, wow, I can't believe I did that?
Not really unusual, because I worked in the dentist office for a couple of years. And then I figured out, okay, I need more hours because they were closed on the weekends. And so there was only a certain amount of hours that I could work. So I ended up applying for a local grocery store. And I worked for Bilo for a couple of years. And I actually worked at Bilo as a cashier, part-time cashier, and had an opportunity to go off to college, which for me was pretty huge in my family. I was the first individual in my family to go to college. And so I transferred there with Bilo. And while I was there, I actually took on a second job. So I worked 2 jobs.
And college?
In college. I went to school full time. I worked almost 40 hours a week as a cashier. And then I took a night job where I was a sitter. So I would sit for an elderly lady who needed someone to be there with her at night. And so it actually worked out for me because she didn't get up a lot in the middle of the night, and it gave me an opportunity to get my homework done and get ready to get up in the morning and then go to work the next morning and on to classes.
But that's almost working 24/7.
I did. It was, that was pretty much kind of my life throughout all of the 4 years that I was in college. And for me, it was because I didn't have the luxury of kind of parents who would be able to be there for me and take care of things financially because they had other obligations with my younger siblings. And
are you the oldest?
I am the second oldest. So I have a brother also. So he and I, he'll probably kill me for saying this, but he stayed back one grade when we were in elementary school. So we were actually in the same grade all the way through middle school and high school. And so we went off to college.
Him crazy.
It did. He played football. He always said I was the popular girl with the popular crowd. But we both went off to college around the same time. And so I went to Georgia Southern. He went to Valdosta State. Okay. And, younger sister graduated a little bit before he did.
So that had to spur him on. So, and I'm just curious because your life experience is different than my life experience. What drove you to do those 3 jobs? I mean, was it, I've got to do this to advance, or was there something that said, you know what, I'm going to take full advantage of this and do everything I can to get to a better spot, for lack of a better term?
Well, it was getting to a better spot in life. Yeah. I was determined that I wanted to graduate from college, and my mom had already instilled that in me for so many years. Valerie, I really want you to go to college. This is the way for you to have a better life for yourself. And so in order to do that, I had to work to make pay, to pay.
Because you're paying for yourself.
I'm paying for everything. And back then, from an insurance standpoint, you can only be on your parents' insurance for a certain amount of years. True. And so I had to have insurance while I was in school. And so I had an opportunity through my job with Food Lion, because Food Lion actually came in and purchased many of the buildings that Bilo was closing down. So that's how I started my career with Food Lion. Okay. And they offered medical insurance and dental insurance to part-time employees.
That's almost unheard of anymore.
It is. And so I counted that as a blessing to be able to have an income to help me to be able to maintain and get through college, but also to be able to have insurance as well. So I didn't have what you would say the traditional college experience of being able to have a lot of fun and go to the football games and the basketball games, because I was working at a grocery store, and, I would be there checking everybody out as they were coming in from the football game.
Well, you were on a mission. I mean, you were determined to do it, and you had to do it yourself. So working at Food Lion, is that that's where you got introduced to Food Lion and then eventually brought you to Chattanooga?
It is. And it's really also what took me off being a CPA and an accountant, because I realized as I was working with Food Lion how I truly enjoyed just being there for the public, just the community aspect and meeting a lot of different people and the engagement there. And so I decided as I was graduating from college, I was going to apply. I applied for some jobs at some banks, and I also applied for a job within Food Lion to go into our training department. And they offered me the job to stay with Food Lion, and they relocated me up to North Georgia. So I lived in North Georgia, Jackson, Georgia, for a few years. And then I had an opportunity a few years after that to apply for a couple of jobs, one in our audit department, because I thought, maybe I can get back over here.
Makes sense.
Yes. And I also applied for a diversity role. So in the early 2000s, Food Lion had a diversity and inclusion
That was
department.
ahead of the curve, wasn't it?
It was. We'd done a lot of work in supplier diversity, and Food Lion had made the decision that they were going to add several what they call diversity manager roles across the company to really go in and have conversations, build relationships with communities, and look at product offerings, where the stores were, and look at products that you would want to provide based on your customer base of the communities that you served. So I really enjoyed that role. I was in that role for about a year or so. Then Food Lion had massive reductions in force, and they closed a lot of stores in this area. So my job was impacted. But what came out of that role for me was my passion of volunteering.
Yeah.
And I got introduced to the NAACP.
Yeah.
I got introduced to the Urban League and a number of nonprofit civic organizations through that work that I was doing.
And I want to get to the NAACP, but before I do, there's a couple of names of schools on your resume that I'm interested. The Harvard Young American Leaders Program, and then you got your MBA from Villanova. Talk a little bit about how you got involved with those and how that, not just how you got involved, but how that's benefited you since you went through those programs.
Sure. So those were two great opportunities for me. Both actually presented themselves a little bit later in my career.
Okay.
So as I evolved and moved into the HR space, I had the opportunity to move to St. Louis, Missouri for a couple of years for a director of HR position. This was around about 2013 for me. And while I was there, I made the decision that I wanted to go back to get my master's degree to school. I'd wanted to go for a while, but I just never had the right time. It just never worked out from a timing standpoint. But while I was in St. Louis, because my husband stayed back here in Chattanooga, I decided I got a lot of free time in the evenings.
Doing that commute.
Doing the commute, yes. So I researched a number of schools that I wanted to get my master's in, and I knew I wanted it to be in human resources. So Villanova, they had an amazing program for human resources development. So I applied and got accepted into the program, and over the next 3 years pursued my master's degree.
Was that all online, or did you have to go to Philadelphia?
It was all online, the program. And then when I graduated, I said, okay, I'm going to the campus.
Did you go and walk?
I did.
Good for you.
I have amazing pictures from the day. And many of the students, because when you enter into the program, you're in the program with a number of students and you take classes together. So you get to know each other in that virtual online setting. So I was able to meet some of my peers that were in the program, as well as some of the teachers and faculty. So that was great.
Oh, that's
and my
very
family came in to celebrate with me as well.
Do you still have relationships with some of those folks today?
I do. A few of them.
Yeah. Well, I know I jumped ahead on that, and I want to get back to you getting to Chattanooga and some of your involvement here, because I think I first met you through the chamber, being on the chamber board and your involvement when you were at Tennessee American Water. But prior to that, you got here and you got involved with the NAACP, and at a very young age. Talk a little bit about that.
I sure can. I actually, when I was with Food Lion in my diversity manager role, I established what I thought was a great relationship with the NAACP here in Chattanooga. And so I would travel over here and partner with them on some of their community events, and Food Lion would be a sponsor. And so ultimately, when my position was eliminated as a part of those reductions in force that Food Lion had, that's when I entered into a role in human resources. So that's where my transition happened.
So you stayed with Food Lion,
I stayed
but just
with
in a
Food
different
Lion
role.
in a different role, and I relocated here to Chattanooga because I was living in Knoxville at the time. So I relocated here to Chattanooga, and so that's what ultimately brought me to Chattanooga. And I started to volunteer as not from a work perspective, but just because this is who Valerie wanted to be involved with in the community. And like many nonprofits, you know how that is. They're limited on resources and people to get the work done. So when you've got what I always like to say is like fresh meat and blood, they pull you in. So I was working
Someone said yes.
Someone said yes, and they have the time. So I was working on a number of committees, membership and, social action. It was just a lot of committees that I started working on. And then about a year into that, the president at the time, and this is all volunteer, came to me and he said, well, Valerie, I'm not going to run for president again. And I was like, oh, my gosh, who's going to run? Do y'all have anybody? What's the plan? And he said, well, I was thinking about you.
Wow.
Like, who? Me? No,
Yeah.
I'm not ready.
And how old are you at this time?
At that time, I was 26 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
26 years old. And I said, I don't think I'm ready for this because, we've talked about my track record. I've worked, and when I put myself into something, I'm all in, and I like to make sure that I'm prepared. And I just didn't feel that I was prepared. I didn't know the organization enough or the ins and outs of the bylaws. And he said, I feel like you would do a tremendous job. His name is Eddie Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, let me pray about it. At that time, my husband and I, we actually met through the NAACP. So I had not actually met my husband at the time. And so I prayed about it, and I felt compelled to do it.
You know what I find interesting about you saying that is you were able to say, I don't feel like I'm prepared. Because not everyone has that perspective. They just go, oh, there's a shiny object and it's up here. I need
Yes.
So it probably said to Eddie Holmes that really tells me this person is prepared because they're questioning whether they have the qualifications to do that. How important was that for you to look at that and evaluate things like that? Have you done that throughout your career?
I have. I don't take on commitments very lightly because I think a lot of times we could get caught up in, oh, somebody wants me to do this. And you get caught up in that aspect and you don't really think about, well, do I have time to do the work? Can I commit to it? And is it really something that I have passion for? And so with NAACP, I had passion for the work. I had to go through the approvals of my job at Food Lion for them to approve it because being president of an organization was going to require time, and I might get pulled into controversial type issues in the community with the NAACP. But they wholeheartedly supported it, Food Lion did. Oh. And I was able to be in that role for about 10 years of president here of the organization. It was a lot of challenges up front because of just sheer age. I was the youngest person and the first female to lead the organization here in Chattanooga. And by far, I had an executive committee that was probably 55 years and older. So they're looking at me like, you're still wet behind the ears. What are you going to come in here and do for us in this role?
Well, talk about some of those challenges on the age side, and particularly with an organization like the NAACP, where you have so many lifelong, not just members, but have fought the battles. Mm-hmm. And you're 26. And as you said, they're going, all right, come on, you're a little wet behind the ears. How did you gain their confidence, gain their trust?
One of the things I had to realize early on was that just by being president and elected president, because I was elected, I wasn't appointed, that didn't bring the level of respect that I needed. I had to build the relationships one by one with individuals that had been really in the battle and committed to the organization for so many years. Hannah Martin, James Mapps. There's so many that had led the way for this historical organization in Chattanooga, and I didn't take that lightly. So I truly took time to build relationships with them, to learn, to lean in. And I tell everybody that experience of being president of the NAACP, I think, has prepared me so much for many other aspects of life and what it means to be humble and what it means to show up in your true, authentic self. But to also realize when you don't have the answers, it's okay. Lean into those who do. So that was very, very life-changing for me.
You had to open yourself up, I imagine, because it's almost a battle within yourself. You got to carry yourself with a confidence to say, I am the president of the NAACP, but I am 26 and I need to build these relationships. I need people to understand that I'm here to learn and I'm here to help.
Yes, and that's what it was about. It was one relationship at a time. It was just digging in and learning the history of the organization. There's a lot of protocols that you have to be familiar with, the bylaws of the organization. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I felt great in regards to the work that we had ahead for us. And also at my age of 26, I had a whole array of just friends and individuals that I worked with in the community that I was now able to bring into the NAACP that they had not known much about or even connected with the work of the NAACP. So I felt good to be able to bring that age diversity to the organization, as well as impacting things in a bit of a different way here in Chattanooga throughout that time.
How did that impact not just your career, but your life?
Well, I met my husband through the NAACP,
Well, that's pretty big.
so that was pretty huge. While I was president here in Chattanooga, his name's Lawrence. He's president of the chapter in Cleveland, Tennessee.
Oh, really?
So we both were presidents of the NAACP, and that's how we just started working together.
Yeah.
He was new, I was new, we were learning, and love blossomed is what I like to say. So for sure that changed my life. But again, I think that relationship piece and me understanding the value of relationships cascaded into the work that I do in the professional setting and corporate.
Yeah.
And understanding that you can work really hard, you can have all the degrees, but true growth and leadership in an organization comes from individuals knowing who you are. And that takes a level of vulnerability, which is what it took for me in the NAACP, I think, and I'd like to say that I was pretty successful in that leadership. And I also feel that it prepared me for my role as president of Tennessee American Water, because leading Tennessee American Water here across American Water is a company that's located all across the United States. And so for Tennessee American Water, we're just one of the subsidiaries of American Water. So I was the youngest president that had been in any of the American Water subsidiaries. And I was the first Black female as well. So with that level of pressure, I was able to kind of reflect back on some of what I experienced with the NAACP. And a lot of times, I know you all have heard of this term, imposter syndrome, where you show up and you're thinking, am I ready? Am I prepared? And so it took a lot for me, surrounded by family and friends that encouraged, and the prayer from my husband and I, to say and have the confidence that I could do that job whenever it was offered to me.
You really had to grow up fast. I mean, you didn't have the luxury, even dating back to high school and college, of living your age. You had to step into roles that you may or may not have been prepared for, but learn those roles quickly and adapt to them.
Yeah, my husband says that a lot when he and I talk about just my life and even his life. He says, Valerie, you are older and more experienced than your years are. And that's spot on. I really have. Even in high school, where I was saying that I was working and wanted to get a job at 15, like my mom, she worked 2 jobs. As I said, she was a single mother. She was taking care of her 4 kids at home. And so I had to take on a bit more of that motherly responsibility at home with my 2 younger siblings, and which is probably to this day why I didn't have any biological kids. They ruined it for me. But yes, it was a lot of responsibility at a young age.
Yeah.
But I have no regrets. I don't think I missed out on anything in life. I feel like where I am, that everything that I've gone through has prepared me for the roles that I've had, either in the professional setting and even in the work that I do in the community. Because I look at the community work that I do as kind of those are the babies that I've birthed. Because I love just being anywhere of having an impact and being an advocate for those that may not have that voice or that strong of a voice, to be able to address any types of inequities that they're facing, and just creating space for opportunities.
Well, let's talk how you got to Tennessee American Water. So you're at Food Line, you get into HR. What got you to Tennessee American Water? So
for me, in the transition to Tennessee American, well, that was a tough decision. I had been with Food Lion for 15 years.
Long time.
It was, all the way, again, back to college. And
I bet you had a lot of loyalty to them, particularly since you worked there in college and provided you some opportunities. And
I did, a lot of loyalty. But I would say about the last 2 years with the company, I felt like even with all those opportunities that I had reached a ceiling for myself. And a couple of things probably impacting that. One was I wasn't open for relocation. I loved being here in Chattanooga. I didn't want to relocate to North Carolina for other opportunities. And then 2, it was just, there were some challenging times with Food Lion. I worked in a lot of rural areas in Kentucky and across Tennessee. And being a Black female in some cases was difficult when you're the only one in the room. And then when you're wearing that HR hat and you're having to talk with people about following policies and procedures. And so I had a lot of tough experiences there I was able
they
to.
don't understand that he was just kidding.
Yes.
That's just the way we are around here.
And can't be that way. Can't be that way. And outside of the walls of Food Line, maybe, but not here.
Right.
So
I would imagine that was very hard.
It was some difficulties. I'll say that. But I always say growing pains, that's what makes you stronger and allows you to appreciate, other opportunities. And so I reached that point with Food Line that I thought I had done everything that I could do. Yeah. I had grown as much as I was going to be able to grow with that company, even for all of the great blessings that I'd had there. And as you said, the commitment that I had for the organization. So I just started to put some fillers out here in Chattanooga to say, hey, if you all know of any companies that are hiring for HR, let me know, just with a few friends. And I actually had a friend of mine that came back and said, I heard that there's going to be a job at Tennessee American Water. And so I knew someone who worked over there, and I reached out to that individual, and they said, well, I actually had you on the list. I was going to call you.
That's nice to hear, isn't it?
It was great to hear. So, all else is kind of history. That individual introduced me to leadership there at Tennessee American Water. I applied for the job. I think I went through 15 interviews.
Wow.
And they eventually hired me. It was a lateral move, though.
You went into HR.
I went to HR. So I moved from HR with Food Line to HR here at Tennessee American Water. And oh my goodness, it has just been tremendous after that. I had to say, American Water, very thankful and blessed for those opportunities there to come in and be an HR manager. And then within 2 years, a director of HR. And then within 2 years, president of Tennessee American Water.
So 4 years after you get there, you're president of Tennessee American Water here in Chattanooga. How old were you?
At the time, I was 35.
And you're the youngest president of all their local American Waters, whether it's Indiana American Water.
California, New Jersey. Yes, the youngest.
That's got to be a great sense of pride.
It is. It's a great sense of pride. But, it's also one of those things that you have to ask yourself in 2015, should I have been the youngest? Should I have been the first Black female? There's always those, companies moving forward in the diversification and creating opportunities for others. I'm glad and so blessed that, I had the ability to be the first. And so with that, I'm hopeful that they'll continue to build upon that and bring others in and create those opportunities for them.
Well, you mentioned imposter syndrome earlier, and I would imagine it plays a big part of that in terms of not am I in the right spot, but am I qualified for this? Why did they choose me? Can you talk about that a little bit? I
can. It was the first when I was, and it probably more so set in that first day that I was driving into the office at Tennessee American Water as the president. And in my mind, it's just so many thoughts. Am I ready for this?
Yeah.
What's everybody going to think? Are they going to think that they just gave her the job, because she's a Black female? All those things kind of go through or went through my mind. And I had already worked with this group because I was their HR manager. So I left as the HR manager, and now I'm coming back as president. And so, I'm thinking about all aspects of the job of, oh my goodness, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an operations person. I've not boots on the ground. I haven't done that work. So for myself, it was kind of like, am I talking myself out of this? And, I really had, I think the closer and closer I got here to the office, which is off of Nicola over here where the water plant is, my confidence built up. And I feel that, and I'm very spiritual Christian. And so for me, it was just a lot of prayer. But I felt like by the time I was driving through the gates, that weight had just slowly lifted off me as I left the house and drove. And so by the time I actually parked and I got ready to walk into the front doors of the office there, it was just a completely different mindset of, Valerie, you worked your ass off for this.
Yeah.
You worked really hard. And while you might not know it all, you know what it takes to get the job done. You've done this. You can do it. You got it. And so walk through that door, and all else is kind of history there.
Did you have to give yourself that pep talk at various times in your career, or was that the one that got you through that front door that first day in that role that you just, maybe not to that degree, but maybe reinforce it every now and then.
Oh, yes. I still have to have those pep talks with myself. I still do. And I think it's just a natural part of us. And for me, I feel like if I didn't have those pep talks with myself, then I would wonder why. I think that keeps you grounded.
You might be taking something for granted.
Exactly. Because there's always more to learn. There's always the ability to grow. And I'm a lifelong learner. So I love reading. I love growing. I love expanding as much of myself as I can. And so I don't take certain things for granted. And so those 4 years that I was at Tennessee American Water as president, had a phenomenal team, took a lot away from my experience, again, as being president of the NAACP and understanding that while I don't have all the answers, I need to build a strong team around me that has the experience. And that's really where the success comes from. I'm not an engineer. I'm not expected to be an engineer. I need to hire a great engineer. And I had a wonderful engineering director, a director of operations and communications person and government affairs. And those were the ones who were experts. And what I needed to do was to lean into them to learn and grow for myself, but also give them the capacity to go out and live in their greatness of the experiences and the work that they were capable of doing.
That's a great perspective, to realize that it's the team that gets you forward. So you're 4 years president of Tennessee American Water, and they moved you into a corporate role. Am I correct about that?
Yes. So I got another tap. I tell you, the last time I actually applied for a job was when I got my HR director job at Tennessee American. So I got another tap on the shoulder for an opportunity at our corporate office. I was asked to move into a vice president role of all of American Water for community development and government affairs. What do I know about government affairs? I don't know. So again, that's that questionable, am I ready for it? Now, the community engagement piece all day, every day, I love that.
That's what you do.
Aspect of the job. That's me. That's who I am. But the stretch part was government affairs.
Yeah. And that's calling on your local politicians, your state politicians, your federal politicians, and putting forth the interests of American Water and their customers.
It is. American Water as a water and wastewater utility is highly regulated in all the states that the company is located. And so you've got a regulatory commission that oversees the rates that the water utility is able to charge customers. So there's relationships that must be established there, as well as compliance. And then on the governmental side as well, of ensuring that if there's any policy or legislation that's passed that could negatively impact us, that we're monitoring that as well, because that not just impacts us, but our customers overall. So being moved into that role of work that I'd never really done to that level before, of course, as president, I got pulled into government affairs, but hey, I had a government affairs manager that did boots on the ground. So that was a different experience, but I loved it.
Did you?
I did. I enjoyed it. And then about a year later, picked up regulatory affairs for the company. So I was leading regulatory and government affairs for the company.
And you're in Camden, New Jersey?
Well, they gave me the opportunity to stay here. So I didn't have to relocate. No, I traveled a lot. I was probably gone every week somewhere. But after the experience my husband and I had with St. Louis, we made the commitment to each other that wouldn't spend that time apart, because it's so tough on a marriage. And for us, I just said I'd rather do the travel versus the actual relocating.
Yeah, no, I get that. So what gets you to Unum?
So fast forward, about 3 years into that role with American Water, I got tapped to take on the role at American Water of Chief Inclusion Officer for the organization, the first role that we had for American Water. So I was in that role for about 2 years, but still doing some of the government regulatory affairs work. And for me, I was at that point in life that the travel was a bit more than I wanted to continue to do. It does. It gets old really fast. And so I made the decision, hey, I'm not looking, but I wouldn't be opposed if there's an opportunity. So through some insights and conversations, heard about
and you're well known in the community too, through all your community involvement and things you do. That, and I think that's something people, particularly younger folks growing their career, appreciate that it's a lot of your community involvement that builds that network that gets you that tap on the shoulder.
It is. It is. So I got a call from an individual that works at Unum, and she said, she didn't directly ask me about the job. She said, hey, we've got this opportunity. If you know someone in your network, you know how that goes.
Don't you love that? If you know someone, do you know anyone named Valerie?
Yeah, sort of, kind of. And for me, I was kind of oblivious. I didn't even think about it originally for myself, because when she and I was having the conversation, I said, let me put some thought into it. I said, I'll get back with you. Give me a couple of days. And the more I thought about it, I was like, well, this might be a good opportunity for me. And so with that, I ended up calling her back, and I said, let's talk. Let's talk a little bit more about the role. I said, I think I might be interested in it. And she said, oh, my goodness. I never in my wildest dreams thought that you would be interested. Wow. She said, I was hoping, but she said, there's no way Valerie's going to leave American Water.
She kind of threw it out there.
Yeah, and I bit. And so went through the full interview process. I really appreciate Unum. They're very thorough. We are very thorough in our interview process. So I went through that process and got the job offer and accepted it. My husband and I had already talked about it again, prayed about it. It was the right time. It was the right time for me.
And what is exactly the role? It's Chief Global Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Unum. Can you explain a little bit about what that does and why it's important for organizations to do that?
I sure can. So the work is completely focused around creating for Unum a workplace where our employees feel and know that they are included and there is a sense of belonging in all the work that we do. It's about creating equitable opportunities for employees. And Unum, we are a global company. So we're located across here in the United States, but we're also in the UK, we're in Ireland, and we're in Poland. So that's the global lens for the role. And for the dynamics of what we deal with here in the U.S. With DE&I, it's different in the UK. It's different in Poland and in Ireland.
How is it different?
Well, an example that I'll give you is, for instance, here in the U.S., we deal a lot with race relations. Mm-hmm. It just goes back to slavery, civil rights movement. So that's core of some of the issues that we have here in the United States that the U.K. doesn't have that level of history that we have. So some of the issues that we deal with in the United Kingdom are more centered around socioeconomic status. So it's about more of the haves and have-nots and where you grew up and what education you have. And so those are a bit of the dynamics that we deal with there. And so for us, we have to keep that lens on it, that some of the commemorations and the challenges here aren't going to be equally as viable or important to the other geographic locations of where we're located. And so my role is creating those opportunities internally for our employees to know that we value who they are. My team does that work. We do a ton of work in the community and partnering with organizations that are focused on inclusivity, such as the Urban League. We've got great partnerships with our Urban League affiliates and our footprints and create opportunities for individuals to apply for jobs for us, and even exposure to the insurance industry, which is not typically an area that many people think about going into from a career standpoint. Right.
Why? I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask this question. DEI gets a bad rap. Why is that, and where do you see it going in terms of being more accepted? Because it's extremely polarizing right now. I mean, why is that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack.
And we don't have
we could do a whole nother podcast on it, but I would say kind of just on the surface, it's more about, and if some individuals not understanding truly what DE&I means, you've got individuals that feel that DEI takes from others and gives to others. And so I truly feel that when you're able to sit down and have a conversation, like put DEI to the side, let's not get caught up on the words, because sometimes that's what creates a bit more of that challenging conversations, and really just talk about, it's about creating a level playing field for all. You talked about and mentioned earlier, I have worked my entire life. I didn't have certain opportunities that many of my peers may have had when I was in high school. I didn't have the opportunity to go to the proms and, to really be able to write a check on where I wanted to go to college. It was struggles along the way for me. Thank goodness there were opportunities that were created, but I had to work really hard. And so to be able to do that created, at least for me, a level of appreciation for where I am in life. And I think it's just trying to get individuals to really understand that not everybody has that equal playing field. You don't always start at the starting line with the same resources and tools. And there's nothing wrong with giving someone those tools and resources to help them to be able to move forward. But just because you're giving them those tools and resources doesn't mean it has to come at the expense of others. So really thinking about that and digging into that conversation is where I feel like there's an opportunity to get traction. But what happens a lot of times is that individuals get caught up on, well, what does equity mean? What does diversity mean? And for us at Unum, which is why for us it's important we put inclusion before diversity, because our values are around in creating a equitable workplace for all of our employees. It doesn't matter what your demographic background is, your gender, it's for all. And it's about creating those spaces to where individuals know when they walk through the doors that they're valued. And creating that opportunity then opens the space up for a conversation around diversity and what that means and things along those lines. But that's kind of Valerie's high level.
That's so well put. I mean, everyone thinks it's a zero-sum game. If you're going to do this, it's going to hurt me. Well, no. And back to your point of when you took those roles where you weren't an engineer in New Water, you're including more people to help get the job done and do it better. Exactly.
And that's what it's about. And sometimes it is about taking a chance on individuals. And for me, like, I didn't check the box for all the jobs that I've had. I didn't check all the boxes, but there was someone who saw something in me and they felt and knew that I would be able to step into that role and leave my own footprint there. And sometimes that's what it takes. It's just taking a chance on someone.
Exactly. And we're running out of time, and I got a couple more questions. And one of them is, do you look back on your career and where you are right now and say, wow, that really prepared me for this? Because you've been going through a lot of, am I ready for this? Now that you're at Unum and in this position, all those opportunities really led to being the perfect candidate for this. That makes sense?
It does. And I think everything, all the jobs, all the opportunities I've had have truly prepared me for at this point in my life. I don't know what the future holds. Quite frankly, I'm enjoying myself right now at Unum. I'm not looking for another opportunity.
No tap?
No tap. I'm hoping no tap right now. I love Chattanooga. I love the community. The work that I get to do now with the Benwood Foundation. I'm on chair of the board and chair of the board for Tennessee Aquarium and Rotary. So I'm very selective, though, these days about where I am able to step in and have an impact. I'm very active with my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We have a social action committee, so I'm very passionate about voter registration, voter empowerment, voter engagement, and just individuals knowing what what power they have with the vote and being able to get out and express that.
Yeah. Valerie, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate you coming in to talk to us. Before I get to my last question, I want to remind our listeners who makes all of this possible. Thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit tva.com/do good here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, last question, and you probably know what it is because I ask everyone the same question. What would you tell your 25-year-old self is important for a happy life?
To take it all in and enjoy the moments. Don't always feel like you have to be planning for the future. For me, I've spent so much of my life thinking about what's next. And if I could go and do it all over again, I would really celebrate those moments a lot more.
Boy, that's nailing it, because I've, and particularly myself personally, over the last 5 years, have gone through that same look back and said, boy, I spent so much time worrying about things that haven't happened yet. Mm-hmm. I got a couple favorite quotes, but one of them is a Tom Petty lyric that says, as sure as night turns to day, most of the things I worry about never happen anyway. And that's so true.
It is.
You know?
It's very true.
We can let our minds just think and then nothing happens.
Exactly. And for me, my favorite quote is being the change that you want to see in this world. And that's what I live by each and every day. And so that's why I say just celebrating those moments, but knowing that everything, all the decisions that you make, try to do it with impact and do it with meaning.
Yeah. Well, I think you live that, because I look at your past, our discussion, all the things you're involved with has been to be that change, and everything you've gotten involved with and all the positive impact. I'm so glad you came in and had this conversation with us.
Well, I am as well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.